Thank you, Richard, for that introduction. I'm going to stand back a little bit and see if I can minimize that interference. President Mulway, thank you very much for your leadership, the opportunity to be here with all of you today. And it is good to see John Miller. He is a sophomore at LSU studying for his finals. And even though I live here in Baton Rouge and he lives here in Baton Rouge, don't really see him that much. So, Frank, I appreciate you bringing him today. The last time I spoke to you here was March the 11th of 2020. And that was a little over 2 years ago. But boy, has it been a tough couple of years. Y'all remember what happened immediately after that particular meeting. We are obviously in a much better place. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here in person. We wouldn't be sitting so close together. We wouldn't be unmasked and all that sort of stuff. But I do want to caution you. I think the pandemic, depending on which expert you talk to, we're not in pandemic anymore, but the virus is still out there. Today, as I was walking in, we have a percent positivity that is approaching 10% again today. Now, just about 6 weeks ago, it was 0.7%. And most tests are being administered at home, and those positive rapid tests never work their way into our dashboard, and so I don't get to see those. So there's more COVID than the test would reflect. The percent positivity probably is not what it should be. The good news is this. The cases have been increasing for several weeks now, but the hospitalizations have not. And so what that's an indication of is that the overwhelming majority, and by the way, this was established by a seroprevalence study that came out nationally a few weeks ago, and they drilled down to the state level too. The vast majority of us have had COVID. We've been vaccinated or both. But what I want you to know, and please take this away from the meeting, is whether you've had the disease, whether you've been vaccinated or both, those protections do wane over time. And so we don't talk in terms of being fully vaccinated anymore, because we wanted people to make sure that they showed up for their second shot. So we wanted people to know if you got a shot, that was great, but you weren't fully vaccinated, so we were talking about full vaccination. Now we talk about staying current. And staying current means you get your booster shot when you're eligible and it's recommended for you. We had questions a while ago about blood donations, and only Richard and I are in this category. But anybody here who's 50 or older, and it's been 3 months or more since your last shot, you're eligible for a booster. Given that we not only expect, but we're entering into, I'm not going to call it a surge today, but an increase. We knew that would happen in the south in the summer. It's going to happen in the winter in the north, because when it's 95 degrees and 95% humidity, we go inside. That's when these things happen. So I'm encouraging you to stay current, get your booster shot. It is how we're going to protect ourselves and, quite frankly, others as well. We are monitoring the hospitalizations very closely. Like I said, they're flat. We're also monitoring to try to figure out whether people in the hospital have a more serious case of the disease on average than they've had in the last several weeks. But all in all, we're in a good place. And so I pray that will continue. The last 2 years since we've been in the pandemic, Richard mentioned this, we've also had 5 hurricanes. 2 of them the strongest to ever make landfall in Louisiana. I'm not going to talk about climate change and our warming planet, but I do believe climate change is real. Our planet is warming. We're having more frequent and more severe storms as a result of it. We are working very hard with the federal government to bring resources to bear for our recovery. Southwest Louisiana was hammered in 2020 with 2 hurricanes, as y'all remember, Laura and Delta. Ida hit southeast Louisiana last year, and those winds extended as far as Baton Rouge, and you still see some blue roofs as a result of it. But we're in hurricane season in just a few weeks, and so please be prepared for that. And you can go to getagameplan.org, because it will give you a checklist of things to think about that you may not ordinarily think about. Oddly enough, we do a fairly good job of warning people of a hurricane and getting people to leave if they really need to leave. Where people die, at least most recently, is because they improperly use a generator, and it's carbon monoxide poisoning. So that checklist has to do with that too. And just because you've had one that was professionally installed, that's a standby generator, whatever, they're not always installed in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations, and we had carbon monoxide poisoning from those generators too. So do what you can now to be ready in case we have to go through a hurricane. But also join me, because I pray every day that we won't have one. And I'm trying to say those prayers now, because once a hurricane forms and it's coming across the Gulf, I don't feel like a great Christian praying it on to our neighbors. But I do. Haven't been successful lately. They've been coming to here to Louisiana. Y'all know we're have less than a month left in the regular legislative session for this year. It's a 3-month session. Obviously, a lot of bills percolating around. I'll talk about a couple of those. What the main point I want to make today is we have a historic opportunity right now to invest in education at every level. Despite the very difficult circumstances 6 years ago, we were able to stabilize higher education funding immediately. We stopped the cuts, and then as we were able, we were increasing education investments. But it's fair to say the budget before the legislature right now probably is the best budget for education that we have seen. Well, I've been around for a long time, 15 years or so in Baton Rouge. I've not seen a budget this good. And then we have record investments that we're going to make in infrastructure as well. And by infrastructure, yes, roads, bridges, ports, airports, but clean drinking water, wastewater systems, broadband, you name it. And so we are in a pretty good spot. And what I want to tell you is, consistent with every budget proposal I've ever given the legislature, I am not recommending a single one-time dollar be spent on a recurring expenditure. And we have record amounts of one-time money that will go for one-time expenditures, particularly for all the infrastructure things that you've seen. But we're also going to recommend, and this is the first time I've done this, that $150 million of recurring revenue not be spent on recurring expenditures, but be spent on one-time expenditures, because we have a record amount of revenue. And we do know that there's going to be some changes as the public health emergency ends and the FMAP is changed. That's the percent that we have to put forward on the Medicaid program and things like that. So there's $150 million there that we're recommending to the legislature that they invest on non-recurring expenditures to help with that transition. So we've got exciting investments being made around the state. I know that for, I guess all of you live or work here in Baton Rouge, or you wouldn't be at the Baton Rouge Rotary Club. The traffic problems here are the worst in the state. And the common denominator there is I-10 coming through Baton Rouge, in particular the bridge. And so for me, and this has been the case for a long time, by the way, and I guess it stands to reason, because what we call the new bridge is as old as I am, and I'm bald and gray. But that bridge is a real challenge, and because it's not just carrying local traffic, as you know, it's one of the most used corridors of transportation anywhere in the country, that runs from Southern California over to Florida. And so having a new bridge, I think the vast majority of Louisiana agrees, is the single most important priority for infrastructure. And that bridge needs to be here in Baton Rouge. And we have a historic opportunity to actually put some money towards what is the most important infrastructure project in the state. And it's not just the most important, it's the most expensive. Because while we don't have a precise dollar figure and inflation is eating everybody's lunch, including ours, and so forth, I can tell you that you cannot build a new bridge in Baton Rouge connected to the interstates on both the west and the east side of the city for less than $2 billion. And you just can't do it. So we have proposed to the legislature that $500 million of our available funding right now, and there's a lot of money there for excess in the current year. There was surplus last year. There's American Rescue Plan dollars, all of these one-time dollars, that it be put in a fund dedicated and can only be spent in furtherance of a Baton Rouge bridge. Now I'm going to tell you why that's important and why we need to do it. And by the way, this, even though this has been the most important project for many, many years, this is the first time any administration has ever proposed any kind of funding like this to further the project. You know where we're at. We've got a lot of different routes it can take, and the public is weighing in now, and they're going to be limited here in the near future, and eventually we're going to get down to one, and we're going to get a record of decision from the U.S. Department of Transportation, which means we can then execute and go build the bridge in that location. So we need to be prepared to do that. This is what happened. In my budget proposal to the legislature, I asked for $500 million. They reduced it. I asked that it be put in a fund that can only be spent on the bridge. They put it in the fund that can be spent on anything. As a result, we can't use that funding as it currently sits there in any amount and say to the federal government as we apply for grant funding that money is available for the bridge, because it can be used on anything else at any time. And that is a real problem. The second thing is the private sector. And we're not going to build a new bridge in Baton Rouge that doesn't involve the private sector. They're not going to get excited about that either, because there's no real commitment on behalf of the state. And these private sector companies will spend millions of dollars coming up with a proposal. They don't want to spend those millions of dollars only to find out we weren't serious. And so having the $500 million, having it in a fund that can only be spent on the bridge is critically important. The second thing is the federal government has this opportunity for competitive grants, and it's enhanced because of the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act that Senator Cassidy voted for, and Representative Carter out of Baton Rouge, Baton Rouge and New Orleans. But that's 5 years. We want to compete for that funding as best we can each of those 5 years. And so we need to put the money away now, and then our grant proposals are much better. They're much stronger because we're putting skin into the game here, and then we can leverage that. But you can't do it if you don't have the money and you don't have it in the fund. And then it gets to be a chicken and the egg thing. Any transportation project that's $500 million or more, you're not going to get a final record of decision from the federal government until you have a viable financing plan. And so if anybody says we want to know where it's going to be built and make sure the federal government's going to approve it before we put the money up, guess what? They're not ever going to do it in that order. We have to put the money up. We have to come up with a viable financing plan in order to get the federal government to give the final approval. And in the meantime, as we do all the environmental documents, they have a shelf life. They expire at some point. And so if you keep doing the environmental work to try to get the clearance, and then you start trying to cobble together the money to build the bridge, by the time you're successful, there is a great chance all the environmental work has terminated. You got to start all over again. The last point I want to make is what I have proposed with respect to the Baton Rouge Bridge is not different than what we have done on multiple transportation projects. Whether it's Highway 1 that's being elevated coming out of Port Fourchon, whether it's I-49 North, I-49 South, whether it's the I-10 bridge in Calcasieu, we have been putting money away for years before there was a record of decision. The difference here is it's $500 million. That's because it's the most expensive project. But what we're doing is the right thing to do, and I'm glad I'm here today speaking to you, because the Senate will take up the money bills this Friday in committee. And I'm imploring everyone here, if you want to see a new bridge anytime soon, this is our opportunity to put it on track, to keep it on track, to meet milestones, and actually construct that bridge. And it's the best opportunity we've ever had, and nobody can assure you that this time next year we will have another one. So contact, well, it's in the Senate, but contact your member of the House and contact your senator as well, and let them know that this is important. This is important. And what is the right amount? The right amount is $500 million. That's 20% of the project cost, something like that. So really asking for your help on that. It is incredibly important. As y'all can tell, I wasn't looking at my notes. I got to catch up here. I think most of my talk was on the bridge. All right. I do want to talk a little bit about the REC meeting. As y'all know, earlier this week, the Revenue Estimating Conference met, and there's a couple of economists. One works for the legislature, one works for the administration, but they get together and go in front of the commission, and they talk about the funding that's available. And they talk about it in lots of different categories. The two big ones are, what does the funding in the current year look like? And then what does the revenue for next year look like? In the current year, they added $349 million of excess. That's one-time money. And so if I proposed the $500 million and showed them exactly where the money could come from before the $349 million was ever recognized. So it is that much easier to do it now. On top of that, they increased the forecast for next year by $104 million in recurring revenue. And one thing that should give you comfort is the REC always adopts the lowest number that comes from those economists, because those economists work up their numbers separately. They go and they make their presentation, and the REC will adopt the forecast based on the lowest one, which is one of the reasons we consistently have had surpluses over the last several years. And if that holds, we will have another surplus next year as a result of that, which is a good thing. I can tell you that having assumed office when we had the biggest deficit in our history, and now having some of the largest surpluses in our history, surpluses are much better. And they do important things because you can only spend them in certain constitutionally prescribed ways. You have to put money in the rainy day fund, 25%, which, by the way, when we pay the installment this year, the rainy day fund will have more money in it than it did the day I became governor. You put 10% to the unfunded accrued liability in our pension system, which we are making tremendous progress on, and by the end of this decade, we will have paid off the initial unfunded accrued liability. That is a good thing. Back in 1988, when they did that Constitutional Convention amendment, I should say, to deal with the unfunded accrued liability, as you might have guessed, the legislature didn't create uniform, even payments over the 40-year amortization period. The payments were very, very small. Do you know when they got to be their biggest? About 3 years ago. But we're now coming down the backside, and so we're on track. So I'm excited about the proposals that are before the legislature. Rail. We talked about traffic a while ago. We need to do everything we can to get traffic off of I-10 before 2024, because that is when the work on the widening between the bridge and the split will cause some lane closures. And one of the things we can do, and the timeline allows us to do it if we proceed, is we can actually invest in passenger rail to get some people off of the interstate. We had $25 million in the budget to do that, and of course we want to pursue passenger rail Baton Rouge and New Orleans, but also in North Louisiana along I-20. The House decided the 25 really should be $12.5 million, and we can only spend it Baton Rouge to New Orleans. And so I'm asking the legislature and the Senate now to restore the $25 million in funding. I have personally met with the president of Amtrak, with the CEO of Kansas City Southern, which is being acquired by the Canadian Pacific, and I've met with that CEO, and I've met with the administrator of the Federal Railroad Administration. They're all leaning forward, but we have to do our part. And if we will do our part, we can establish that rail link. And how nice will it be to be able to live in one city and work in the other, or recreate in the other, or go to the airport without bringing a car to park in long-term parking, and or go secure a medical appointment there, or they can come here, whatever. Baton Rouge and New Orleans, if we will just create a better linkage, we can compete together as a super region as opposed to the two cities competing against one another. And passenger rail is something that is critically important if we want that vision to become a reality. Education. We have funding in the budget today that should be improved for education, improved in a few ways. First of all, the key to education, I don't care whether we're talking higher education, K through 12, or early childhood, is to have a professional, well-educated, motivated teacher in that room with those students, whether they are 2 years old, or whether they are 22 years old, or 52 years old. And so we need to make sure we're investing in that. We need to get our teacher pay here in Louisiana to the Southern Regional average. And let me tell you why. We have teachers who are leaving the classroom in bigger numbers and sooner in their careers than they used to. We have fewer teachers who are going into colleges of education or pursuing alternative certification so they become teachers. And we are also in competition for those who have their teaching certificates with other states. Mississippi just gave a $5,100 pay raise. Now, we have $1,500 in the budget right now. With the additional funding that was recognized, we can get that to $2,000. I'm calling on the Senate to do that, to a $2,000 pay raise for our teachers. It'll be $1,000 for our support workers. We also have record investments in early childhood. Right now, there's $40 million to increase the number of slots that are available out there, high-quality slots. There's $40 million there. We're asking the Senate to move that to $60 million with amendments that we're going to be proposing. That makes sense. What we know is that if a child is on grade level in terms of reading, I think that's the most important, but I mean, math is really important too. I just wasn't very good at math. But if you can read at grade level by grade 3, it is so much more likely that you're going to be successful, not just getting to the 4th grade, but all the way through. But if you're not, it is very hard to catch that young person up. And then it makes a difference for the rest of their lives. We had better invest more on the front end, early childhood, and sustain those investments for a generation. And if we will do that, you watch how that transforms the state of Louisiana in a positive way. So we're doing that as well. And then we have a great budget for higher education where we increase the funding formula. There's faculty pay raise funding there. Richard, you never saw this on the Board of Regents. Every unfunded mandate or every mandated cost increase is covered with the funds in order to execute that in our budget this year. Excited about where we are with that. And of course, y'all know there's a whole lot more going on over there. One of the things that I'm starting to get questions on, and I'm going to address it here today, is a bill that I'm concerned about. We all know the news last week from the Supreme Court leak, Roe versus Wade, and what's likely to happen there. You all probably know, if you've been paying attention, that over my time in the legislature and as governor, I have demonstrated consistently that I am pro-life. I am. I don't apologize for it. I think that's where most Louisianans are. But there is a bill that is particularly problematic, and it's self-styled as a pro-life bill. But in my opinion, it moves in the wrong direction because it would make it a crime for the mother to have an abortion, whether it was a procedure or whether it is medication. And we've had an architecture in place since at least 2006 with the trigger statute. And never before have we sought to make it a crime for the mother. I think that is wrong. The second thing is the way it would change the definitions. There are certain types of contraception that would be illegal and subject the mother to criminal penalties as well, the same criminal penalties. You would not be able to have in vitro fertilization in Louisiana if this bill, 813, becomes law. And finally, it is patently unconstitutional because there's language in the bill that says that no Supreme Court decision, past, present, or future, would ever be binding in Louisiana if it was not consistent with that bill. I want y'all to think about that. We take an oath of office. You know what that oath is to? It is to the Constitution. And we don't get to be the final arbiters of what that Constitution means. And if every state tried to do that, and just think about it, it wouldn't just be limited to abortion. You could do it on guns. You could do it on anything you wanted to do. It is patently unconstitutional, and it is violative of every person's oath of office in the legislature. And it would be violating mine. So I'm just telling you, I've never done this as your governor. 813, I don't think it will come to my desk. I know it won't get off my desk. And so I just wanted to make that announcement. There are better ways for us to proceed. By the way, I'm not by myself on this. The Susan B. Anthony list is against the bill. Louisiana Right to Life is against the bill. The Catholic bishops here in Louisiana are against the bill. The Louisiana Family Forum is against the bill because it really turns on its head everything that we've been talking about for years. And there's just a much better way to do this. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap up. Only about a minute left. The president's there. I'm willing to take a question. And I will try to get it done in a minute. Yes, sir.
Tell them to use the mic. Please use the mic.
I know you've talked about this the last time you were here 2 years ago. Can you give us an update on the City of St. George referendum?
Yeah, well, that's in courts now. So we know how the election.
I just wondered if there was any further.
No, I haven't heard. In fact, I don't know whether the court is still considering that matter. I don't know whether the trial is concluded and we're waiting for the judge to rule. The judge may have ruled this morning. I don't know what's going on there. Yes.
Aaron Moak, East Baton Rouge Parish Metro Councilman. Just a quick local issue. One, yes, it is still in court. It's going on today. I think they are wrapping up. So I can't tell you where it's leaning or whatever, but they are still continuing today. One thing that you touched on a lot of subjects, appreciate you speaking on many things that's going on. One of the things that's local here that comes through the federal money, what I call the Garrett Graves money or the flood money that has come down and everything. There's been a lot of talk about the Corps and the Combee River Diversion Canal and the problems with the state and gas pipeline moving and everything and so on. We could really use some assistance to light some fire under them. We're coming up on, like you said, hurricane season, flood season and everything. So it is a big issue as far as trying to get that wrapped up, and the date seems to be getting pushed and pushed and pushed. Also here in East Baton Rouge Parish, we have the 5 Tributaries Project, which is a kind of a core thing. We would love some assistance on that and moving those forward and everything. But thank you for everything else you've done, and if you have any comments on those.
Well, I do, and I'll keep it very quickly. I too am have a sense of urgency about it, and I have never, in fact, to my knowledge, no governor has ever gone and met with the owner of a right-of-way to try to make sure that they would work with the Corps and the state to make sure that we can move that pipeline. But the week before Thanksgiving, I was joined by the chief engineer of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers coming out of Washington. We went to Dallas and we met with the folks there at Energy Transfer in order to impress upon them the importance of doing this. We have had success since then, and there's a framework because we have to move it in multiple places. We now have a framework to go forward. That project is, and I think you saw the article in the Advocate just the other day, that is a huge project. It's going to be helpful for folks all over this region. And I think there will be a delay. I think that's clear, not in years, but maybe a year or whatever. But we're going to deliver that project. And look, I enjoy working with Garrett on whether it's flood relief money and all of that sort of stuff, and he's been very, very helpful. You are seeing record investments in flood control and mitigation here in Louisiana and elsewhere around the state. So I share your sense of urgency. Thank you for pointing that out. I am past 1 o'clock. God bless y'all. Pray no hurricanes this year, okay? Thank you.